Hey everybody, so I'm not doing a cover this week. I literally have no time. And I don't have time because I just spent the last week in Patagonia. It was really sick, but I just got home yesterday very, very late, and that's why I'm in my room that just kind of looks like right now, and I didn't have time to track any sort of song this week. But I do really want to do the new Beyonce song, so if you guys think it'd be cool, or funny, or you just want to see me wear a cowboy hat, let me know. So my family really likes hiking. A couple years ago, we did Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. And it was really awesome. That was a pretty eye-opening experience to kind of get into the culture, and also probably one of the most physically challenging things that I've ever done in my life. So this time around, we decided let's try and go somewhere new. Let's switch it up a little bit. So as opposed to just hiking up one big-ass mountain, and that's kind of the whole thing, this one was more like a trail that we did, and it was self-guided. So we didn't have anybody that was showing us our way up there. We just kind of did it on our own. Okay, small history interlude. Patagonia is this region in South America that's partially governed by Chile, partially governed by Argentina. Magellan was there a long ass time ago, and he named Patagonia because he encountered these indigenous people that were 13 feet tall, and he said that they were Patagons, or giants. So Patagons, Patagonia, you get the idea. We went to the Chile side. So we flew into Santiago, and then we flew down to the campsite. You can do a couple different treks if you're in Patagonia. We decided to do what's called the W trek. So we flew into Santiago. We stayed in this really cool hotel called the Hotel Bonaparte. I honestly don't know historically why they have such an infatuation with him there. It was really cool. We got to walk around the marketplaces. We got to eat some empanadas. I got to practice my Spanish, and then also apologize to a lot of people for how my Spanish is. After we were done in Santiago, we flew down to a place called Puerto Natales, which is how you get to the actual campsite. When I was walking around Puerto Natales, I noticed there were all of these clan-looking red and white figures all around the town. It turns out that they're actually representing the Selk'nam people, which was this indigenous tribe from the 1500s. The red and white figures are actually spiritual representations during what's called the Hain, which is a spiritual process that was practiced by the Selk'nam people. It's kind of just like this rite of passage for the young men in the culture. So after a year or 2 years or sometimes 3 years of being prepped for how to be a man, I guess is how it was described to me, the last part of the ritual is that people would dress up as all these red and white figures, and they would go and attack the young boys. And the boys' job was basically to take off the mask and say, oh, you're just a human. Okay, great. I've conquered my fears. And then boom, they're men, is how it works. But the spirits are kind of supposed to be keeping the little boys and girls in line. So if you do something bad, the spirits are going to come get you. But it was a very interesting part of history. It was honestly very well represented and very appropriately represented in the town. So the sweater that I'm wearing actually has some Selk'nam patterns on it, which I thought was pretty cool. And it was really interesting getting to learn about it. I got a really cool pamphlet about all the different spirits and what they represent and everything. Anyway, now we're taking a bus ride to the actual campsite. The campsite itself is called Torre Central. Torres meaning towers in Spanish. They call it towers because there's these two giant mountains on the campsite that look like towers. When we got to Torre Central, we were staying in what is called a refugio, or just a little nesting building for all the people there. You get basic things like a tent and a place to go to the bathroom and a little shop in case you need an extra pair of gloves or something. These refugios were shared by lots of other people, 50, 60 people who were also there hiking. A lot of them did not speak English, and I ended up also having to use lots of the facilities with them because there was just really limited resources. So anyway, day one of this hike, 16.5 miles, 40,000 steps, 296 flights climbed. This whole trip was a little difficult. Actually, it was probably the most physically challenging thing I've done in my entire life. We hiked from Torre Central all the way up to the towers to see them, and then we came back down. It happened to be a torrential downpour that day. We were just soaking wet, climbing up lots and lots of steep rocks. It's actually pretty technical, especially compared to when we hiked Kilimanjaro. But it was obviously very worth it. Here are some cool photos of what it looked like at the top. There's a really beautiful lookout over this body of water, and it's pretty breathtaking. One of the guys in our crew actually saw a puma, which is cool, a little scary. I'm a little happy that maybe I didn't get as close to the puma, but it was pretty cool. One of the main differences between this and Kilimanjaro, as I mentioned before, though, is that in Kilimanjaro, we were just ascending the whole time. You just get to the top. There's not really stops where you go up and then back down, except for the very last day where you just leave the mountain. It was a little weird to do 4 or 5 hours of hiking all the way up and be exhausted and then have to do it on the way down, which honestly is not that easy. I mean, I think in my brain, I was okay, going down is going to be a lot easier than going up. And you're a little bit faster, sure, but man, I almost lost a toenail doing this shit. It was pretty hard. And all the enthusiasm is kind of taken out of your soul when you've already seen the top and you got to see the really awesome view. You just have to go down. Still, it was really awesome. So now we're on to day 2. Day 2 was 12.25 miles, 30,000 steps, and 146 flights climbed. So day 2, we were going from Torre Central on the Cuernos path. A lot better weather this day. Spirits were a lot higher. This day had a lot of really, really pretty views that weren't obscured by clouds and rain, which was kind of nice. I think that for me on this day, probably the coolest thing I saw was a giant condor that was flying around. This just badass, big ass bird that flies around. There are actually a lot of birds of prey. I'll get to in a second, but we saw like a ton of really cool stuff. And yeah, we saw this really, really pretty waterfall at the end. It was a great spot to eat lunch and just kind of enjoy the view. The next Refugio that we stayed at was actually a little bit nicer than the first one. This one had a dining hall, and it also had a really nice bathroom. And there were showers that weren't like communal showers that you were sharing with other people. Touch on that in a second. I also discovered at this Refugio that we were staying with a couple Americans because a few of them were talking about that song Squirrels in My Pants from Phineas and Ferb.
Watch me put it S to the I to the M to the P.
Who you got back home, water in your pants?
S-I-M-P, squirrels in my pants.
Made me feel right at home. The diet when we were there was interesting too. A lot of it was kind of similar to what we eat in America. Like for breakfast, you'd have eggs and yogurt and coffee. The lunches were a little weird. The lunches we would get every day were these really, really thick pieces of bread with a ton of mayo and then like chopped up veggies and like some shredded chicken. And then of course, lots of like protein bars and nuts and that kind of thing. Okay, on to day three. Day three, we hiked 13.5 miles, 30,000 steps, 174 flights climbed. The days honestly just kind of kept getting better and better for me. The views on this day were very glacier filled. So a lot of the bodies of water there are actually glacial. So this day we woke up at the Francis Refugio. We hiked up to the Francis Valley at this little lookout, and then we're going to climb down from there and make it to Pine Grande. Featured characters in this video, if I haven't already mentioned, are my brother and his fiance, Margot, who were kind of like my hiking buddies throughout this whole thing. I was with them even though there were many other people on our trip. For example, my mom, who was just a little bit slower and kind of wanted to chill, she ended up doing some other parts of the hike that kind of bypassed a little bit of the intensity, so I didn't really get to see her as much on the trails. So at this really awesome lookout right here, there's an amazing view of all the glaciers and the mountains, and we ended up hiking down through this really interesting patch of land that was a part of a forest fire. So you can see a lot of these trees are just burned and white. I actually don't know what happened. I don't think we ever got to the bottom of that. But generally, like the landscape throughout this whole entire hike was just so diverse. There were so many different kinds of plants. My brother, who's actually an evolutionary biologist, was like kind of nerding out the whole time and taking lots of pictures and slowing us down. But there were a lot of really awesome things to see, and according to him, there were lots of things that you wouldn't necessarily have expected to see living so closely together. Here's another really awesome bird we saw. I think this might have been a falcon. It was a little hard to tell. Anyway, now we are landing at Pine Grande. This was by far my favorite Refugio that we stayed at. This felt like a very communal one. There were more amenities there. Like they had a buffet style food hall there that people could eat at, and they even had like a really tiny little mart there if you wanted any like food like cup noodles or a cappuccino or something. I think also it just felt very like close knit. At the other Refugios, our tents were like a little spread out, but in this one we were probably like 10-15 feet away from one another. I got this really cute video of a little fox that was running around. They tell people to put their shoes inside their tents because the foxes will come and eat them. Okay, now we're on the last day of hiking. 10.4 miles, 25,000 steps, 97 flights climbed. So this last day we could have done, I think, like 16 miles if we wanted to. There were a few different lookouts from Pine Grande, and we ended up having to return to Pine Grande. So you could go out and do a few of the different lookouts and then come back. Me, Margot, and Ian ended up deciding to do just the first one, which was at Gray's Point. It was quite cold and windy on this day. I don't know if I mentioned this, but Patagonia is particularly windy. It was so windy that one of the days they had to put up these caution ropes because supposedly some of the climbers were getting like blown off some of the cliffs. I don't know if that's true, but like that's what we were told. So here's some cool footage of some lakes that we saw. Again, I believe that these were glacial lakes. We saw some cool icebergs, but by far the coolest thing that we saw that day is when we were walking down the mountain, and there was this ginormous caracara sitting there, which is this really cool bird of prey. It was just sitting there, like, eating whatever it was eating, having lunch with everybody else. I unfortunately did not capture the best photos of this, but somebody was there with, like, a really nice, like, telescope camera, and he got a really sick shot of it. I wish I had seen it. The wingspan on this motherfucker was nutty. I mean, it was a big-ass bird. Like, I was not trying to get in trouble with this guy. So anyway, that was our last day hiking. We came down to the Pine Grande Refugio, and we waited to go home. Then I got to take a shower, and the shower situation was a little interesting. It was one soap dispenser on the outside of 5 showers, and the showers were like limited on water, so you'd have to like push the pump, and then water would come down for like 10 seconds, and then it would stop. So I became very close with this other German fellow there because we'd go and hit the shower thing. The water would come down, then we'd have to like rush out there and like get the soap and then go back to our showers. It was a very intimate experience. I'm a little happy, to be honest, to be back in like a shower where it's just me. You know what? It was a valuable experience. Here's a video of us walking around at like 10 at night in Puerto Natales before we got on like a 4 a.m. shuttle to go get on our flight. So anyway, that's my little recap of my time spent in Patagonia. It was really, really amazing. I mean, I can't really recommend it enough, especially to people that are into hiking or the outdoors. It is not cheap to get over there. Like, let's just kind of address the elephant in the room. But if it's within your means, I really do think that it offers a pretty wonderful experience. You know, I really enjoyed getting to learn about a lot of the culture that was in like Puerto Natales and stuff, and learn about the history of Patagonia. But on top of that, honestly, like, it was really fun getting to talk to other people that were there because nobody was from the same place. Like, I talked to people that were from Germany. I talked to people that were from Asia. I talked to people that were from Italy. Seems like most of the people there are just on some sort of pursuit of happiness journey. Like, nobody was really there by mistake. Even the workers who were just like, I don't even care if I get paid that much. I just want to be here so that I can get the benefits of going to hike this all the time. And I think I'm also a little bit of a sucker for some of the history that was there. Unfortunately, a lot of history kind of goes untaught in public schools, and I truly had no idea about the indigenous Selk'nam people. And I think that was probably one of the most fascinating parts of the whole trip. But I'm pretty certain that I would have never had any idea about any of that stuff unless I'd actually visited the region. And I think there's only like one person in the world that still speaks the native language. It was definitely a bit of an undertaking, though. I will say it has in common with Kilimanjaro that I don't know if I necessarily feel the urge to do it again in my life. I would definitely do a different trek, but I don't think I would do the W trek again. Either way, I'm incredibly grateful for the experience. It was extremely worthwhile. I met a lot of amazing people. I got a great workout in, and I learned a lot about some really beautiful but also pretty dark history that I don't think I would have ever encountered otherwise. So thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is not like the normal style video. Like I said, I just physically could not possibly have had time to do a cover this week, but it's kind of fun to share like little parts of my life, even if they're not music related with you guys. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment any future videos you'd like to see down below.